Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you share with us and really dig into the most compelling information, the insights, and sometimes the pretty surprising facts we find in there.
Exactly. Our aim is always to help you quickly get to the heart of the ideas, the unique perspectives in the material you send over. We cut through the noise, really.
And today, well, we're diving into a really extraordinary stack of material. It's all centered around recent news concerning Pope Francis. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack some, let's say, wildly unique perceptions and claims from these sources.
Absolutely. It's a deep dive into a very specific viewpoint about what this source claims happened, where things supposedly stand now, and, visions of what might come next. It involves layers of subtle realities interacting with major global institutions, like the Vatican.
Right. So get ready because this material takes some turns you really might not expect. We're navigating these very specific, quite unusual points from the source material you shared. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's jump right in.
So the core claim, presented almost like breaking news in the source material, it's that Pope Francis, contrary to the public announcement saying he was getting better, is actually perceived as having died before that Monday, April 21st, 2025 date.
That's right. This particular account suggests his passing happened maybe 24 to 48 hours before that official date, and specifically in a hospital setting.
And what's really striking, according to this source, is the timing. His death is perceived as happening almost exactly when the announcement came out that he was improving.
Precisely. And the material touches on, well, what it sees as the strategic timing for making the official announcement on April 21st. It's presented as linked to the post-Easter period, a time when perhaps public attention is focused elsewhere, or maybe in this view, more receptive.
Okay, so if that's the perceived past event, where is Pope Francis perceived to be now? As of April 25th, 2025, according to this material, it sounds like the source describes sort of dual locations for his consciousness, or subtle body.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
The first place described is called a Regeneration spa or lab. The source paints a picture of an environment that sounds, well, like a laboratory, but it features something like a jacuzzi-style tub.
A jacuzzi tub, okay. And what's supposedly in this tub?
The source claims it's filled with a gelatinous solution, and it says this solution originates from entities they call Arcturians.
Arcturians.
Yeah. And its purpose, as presented, is pretty remarkable: to rejuvenate his body, apparently even making him look younger with a different face while he's in this specific location.
And who is perceived to be running this place, this facility?
This material states it's run by entities identified as reptilians and draconians. It also says humanoids are present too.
Wow. Reptilians and draconians. And the source suggests he's actually been here before.
Yes, the account mentions he's supposedly been brought to this place 5 or 6 times previously.
Okay.
And the reason given, it's for a quicker recovery process than his, physical human body would allow. The source also perceives him as being subconsciously aware while this is happening.
The material also gets into some detail about his perceived nature. It mentions a strong hybridization. What does the source actually say about that?
It's a very, very specific claim. The source presents his perceived makeup as 66% reptilian, 12% draconian, and about 5–6% humanoid.
That's specific.
And this particular perceived mix is noted as making his earth body very malleable, which, this account suggests, was used both to enable connection and peace, but also ultimately to gather energy and information. The source also includes this perception that he's lived past lives as Pope on Earth. It claims 3 such lives, actually.
3 times before.
Okay.
And his perceived future role after this regeneration period.
The account predicts he'll stay at this spa for a longer time, eventually returning to Earth, but maybe in over 100 years.
Over a century.
Yeah. For a role perceived as involving significant power and many followers, this future role is presented as being focused on collecting energy and information, essentially acting, in the source's own words, like an etheric spy.
An etheric spy. Okay, that's one perceived location in future. But you said the source describes a second perceived location for him on April 25th.
Right, exactly. The second location is described as a castle. It's supposedly situated near Earth's frontier with space.
A castle near space.
Yeah, and it's said to be part of a larger structure, possibly linked to something called Olymp.
Olymp. Okay, what's this structure like in this account? A castle near space. Sounds unusual.
It's described as having partially subtle walls, apparently for camouflage, but the interior is solid and physical.
Subtle walls for camouflage. And who supposedly built this, according to the source material?
It's claimed to have been built by a whole community of entities and races. including reptilians, Arcturians, Draconians, and something called egregores.
Egregores, too.
And this account points to a powerful reptilian shadow figure described as the King of the Waters being behind it all. Each group supposedly contributed a part to building it.
King of the Waters.
Okay.
Okay. And what's its purpose? Why build this castle structure?
This location is presented as being used as a transfer point. Its purpose, according to the source, is specifically to bring the new pope closer to Earth's energy field. This is seen as helping facilitate a smoother transition for his arrival.
Fascinating. Okay, so moving on from Pope Francis's perceived current state, the source material seems to lay out a perceived plan for the next pope. How does this next pope supposedly arrive?
Well, the account claims the next pope will actually be created as an adult body, in the same lab environment as that regeneration tub we were talking about.
Created as an adult.
Yeah. And from there, this body is said to be brought through that castle space structure.
Okay, so that's presented as quite different from how Pope Francis arrived on Earth, which this source perceived as coming from the lab but involved a natural birth, right? Not through the castle.
Exactly. This material presents a very different perceived method for the successor. The new pope's arrival on Earth is described as happening invisibly, apparently inside some kind of square container or vessel.
Invisible.
Then, upon reaching Earth, this figure is said to emerge looking like a normal person, heading towards Rome. The source also adds that this figure is subtly accompanied by entities identified as a reptilian and a draconian.
And the source apparently details differences in this new pope's body compared to a naturally born human.
Yeah.
What are those supposed differences?
Yes, the description is that this new body is more rigid, it lacks emotions. The source uses terms like zero emotions, no emotional body, and is insensitive.
Zero emotions.
Yeah, and it's also claimed to have no need for normal food. Instead, it supposedly feeds on prana.
Prana, like subtle energy.
That's how the source presents it, yes. A type of subtle energy drawn from close followers.
Why go through all this according to the source? What's the perceived intention behind this whole process?
It's presented as a very deliberate strategy. The goal is apparently to create a sense of continuity, to make it look like it's the same pope, just in a new body.
And I see.
The source claims this is intended to prevent doubt, avoid human analysis or scrutiny of this new figure, and basically ensure easy acceptance of perceived future plans.
Okay. Shifting gears a bit from the specifics of the succession. The source material also seems to delve into the perceived future of religion and control more broadly. What does it suggest happens immediately after Pope Francis's perceived departure?
The source predicts perceived geopolitical and religious conflicts, different religions vying for what it calls perceived superiority.
And what about the future conclave? There's an esoteric perception of that mentioned.
Yes, the account describes 24 participants plus a leader. And the source notes a perceived similarity in their physical appearance. Bald heads, big noses, wrinkled faces.
Really? Why?
It links this appearance to them having shared information presented as either genetic or learned, which is supposedly aimed at attracting fanatics.
Attracting fanatics. Okay. Tell us more about the leader perceived to be at the center of this conclave.
This figure is presented as the 25th person. The source makes a very specific claim. This individual has 100% reptilian DNA and is possessed by an entity called a Draco.
Possessed by a Draco?
The material adds that this individual is perceived as having a human diagnosis, something like schizophrenia or bipolarity, which the entity supposedly exploits. This leader is presented as being chosen by these entities, but also as having sort of chosen themselves, seen as a strong, action-oriented representative supposedly needed for this perceived moment.
Wow. The material also seems to unpack a perceived hidden message in certain prophecies, like the fall of Rome.
Right. And what is that perceived hidden message, according to this source?
It's not presented as, Rome literally crumbling. Instead, it's claimed to be a strategy to unite religions under a single banner.
Unite religions? How?
Well, the source suggests this is intended to cause public confusion and disorientation, make people feel lost, basically, so they more easily accept a perceived new project. And how is this perceived future religious system structured? What does it look like?
It's described as a pyramid structure. You have the leader at the very top. The involved entities, the Draco and reptilians, are also said to be present, sort of alongside or behind the leader.
Okay.
Then below them are smaller leaders. And at the very bottom, there's what's presented as a subservient fanatic population, seen, according to the source, as simply to be used.
To be used.
Yeah. This bottom group is perceived as believing they're praying to a higher power, but subtly they're actually praying to this Draco entity. This whole new religion is presented as being much more aggressive, gripping people really tightly.
This account also brings Africa into the picture, attributing a specific and frankly, rather disturbing role to the continent in this perceived plan.
It does. The link is seen partly through the perceived potential origin of the next pope, possibly from South Africa.
And why South Africa specifically?
This is presented as symbolizing a smooth transition and normalization, moving from a pope of one skin color to another, which, in this view, helps normalize the perceived future religious changes that are planned.
I see. And the perceived use of ancient African rituals is also mentioned.
Yes, the source claims that the idea and the name of these rituals, which African people themselves see as pure, connected to ancestors, will essentially be co-opted for this new perceived religion.
Co-opted how?
The material asserts that their energetic purpose will be changed, twisted, really. Instead of their original intention, they'll be used to invoke these specific entities.
That's quite a claim. The source also touches upon the perceived reason for Africa's current suffering and poverty.
It does. It presents the view that there's a purpose behind this suffering, that it will somehow be used in the perceived future plan. There's also a particular perceived interest in African children mentioned, attributed to their perceived joviality and purity.
And experiments.
The material mentions perceived ongoing experiments on the African population. It uses terms like injections and subtle air filters masks, linking them to past tests that might perceive future issues. Things labeled AU and FI are mentioned in this context.
Right. Speaking of future issues, this source material raises the possibility of another looming threat, described as an air pandemic.
Yeah, and this perceived pandemic is presented as very different from ones we might think of now. It's seen as energetic, happening at air level, and felt kind of above the head.
Above the head? What are the perceived effects then, according to the source?
The material describes the air itself becoming heavy, dense, really hard to breathe, almost liquid-like.
The liquid air.
That's the description. And this is perceived to cause physical symptoms like suffocation, skin problems, and also a degradation of the mental body. It's linked to perceived radiations or waves circulating in the air.
That sounds incredibly intense. What's the perceived mortality rate associated with this?
The source presents a very high perceived rate, 96% globally, but it notes regional differences. It's perceived as being more intense in places like Africa and Latin America, and supposedly less intense in Europe, where the perceived density of this effect is lower.
96%. And the perceived probability and timing for something like this?
The perceived probability given is somewhere between 15% and 30%. So not certain, but possible in this view. And the potential timing is seen as maybe 50 to 100 years from now. This time frame is presented as the ideal time from the perspective of these entities.
Okay. Does the source offer any suggestions for protection against this potential future threat?
Yes, it does suggest some methods. The main ones are to actively avoid panic and negative vibration, and to connect strongly with the earth and nature.
How so?
This includes perceived benefits from things like being on grass, being in water, being near mountains, and even near wild animals, apparently due to their energetic presence, according to this account.
Interesting. And just to circle back to where we started, the source material even offers a perceived glimpse into Pope Francis's final moments.
It does, yeah. The perceived moment of his passing is described very specifically as being injected in the chest with a liquid that then expanded, like foam, causing suffocation.
Injected. And who is perceived to be behind this, according to this account?
According to the source, it was his perceived friends.
His friends? And the source notes how he perceived this event.
Yes, he is perceived as having accepted it naturally, just accepted it. The account then claims that his energetic body was taken in arms while he was asleep and placed into that regeneration tub we discussed right at the beginning.
Wow, okay. That really was a journey through some truly extraordinary perceptions presented in these sources you shared with us.
Indeed. I mean, from perceived secret spa treatments for popes run by specific entities to these detailed plans for creating a successor, the pyramid religious structure, even an air-based pandemic threat. The material offers a very singular, very complex lens on perceived subtle realities and potential future possibilities.
And, as always, our role here is just to help you navigate and understand the information within the sources you bring us. We present these unique perspectives as they're found in the material, let you consider them, without us taking sides.
Exactly. It's really about bringing clarity to the specific claims being made in these particular texts. That's the goal.
So what stands out to you after hearing this deep dive into these particular sources? How do these perceived layers of subtle reality, as they're presented here, maybe influence your perspective on what happens in the visible world?
It certainly leaves you contemplating, doesn't it? About the nature of power, the dynamics of belief, and the forces, both seen and unseen, that some people perceive might be shaping our world.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing these sources and for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.